Armenia is often criticized by Azerbaijan as being a mono-ethnic state, since about 98% of its population is Armenian. This characterization, which is mainly propagated by official Baku, serves a political purpose, to suggest that Armenia allegedly discriminates against national minorities. However, such accusations are not only unfounded and distorted, but also sharply contradict the situation within Azerbaijan itself, where national minorities are subjected to systemic oppression. Moreover, the forced displacement of the Armenians of Artsakh and the destruction of Armenian cultural heritage fully exposes the double standards present in that country. Armenia is a mono-ethnic, yet tolerant state. Indeed, Armenia is a country whose population is predominantly Armenian by ethnicity, but within it live Yazidis, Assyrians, Russians, Greeks, Jews, Kurds, and other minorities who have the right to education in their own languages, cultural centers, media outlets, and representation in local self-government bodies, even in the highest legislative body. For example, in parliament and on Armenian public radio, programs are regularly broadcast. In some schools, classes are taught in Yazidi and Russian. The Yazidi, Assyrian, and Russian communities are consistently involved in state and civic processes. All of this demonstrates that although Armenia does not have demographic diversity, it possesses a comparatively high level of legal and cultural inclusivity. Azerbaijan, on the other hand, is a multi-ethnic country demographically, but one that exerts systemic pressure. Azerbaijan is formally multi-ethnic, with Lezgins, Talish, Avars, Udins, Tatars, Kurds, Tats, and others living there. However, this diversity is merely superficial. In reality, any attempt to assert national identity in Azerbaijan is perceived as a threat to state security. There is no opportunity to receive education in one's native language, and there are obstacles to choosing names and surnames characteristic of ethnic minorities for newborns, such as Talish and Lezgins. There are also barriers to broadcasting television channels, publishing newspapers and books in minority languages. This is the true situation in Azerbaijan. We will return later to the individuals who have been threatened. Systemically, the problems faced by minorities in Azerbaijan are diverse. In Azerbaijan, there is almost no education in minority languages within the state education system, even though official Baku regularly claims that it is taking steps to implement the principles of the European Charter for Regional or Minority Languages, adopted by the Council of Europe on November 5, 1992. However, these measures remain only on paper. As we have already come to understand, the cult of personality is a clear line of state policy in Azerbaijan, and this line is evident in the education system from kindergarten through to school. For example, for years, special events have been organized in Azerbaijani kindergartens and schools. These events are held under the slogan, "We are Haydar Baba's grandchildren." In this context, a question arises. If the rights and freedoms of nationalities are respected, then why is everyone forced to become Haydar's grandchildren? In this way, children lose their own identity at an early age. In recent years, Aliyev, who is suffering from a victory euphoria, has established a new order in the education system. School uniforms are becoming more and more similar to military uniforms. It is precisely this category that becomes cannon fodder. Let us recall that during the 2020 war, Aliyev literally filled the front lines with Talish, Kurds, and also thousands of mercenaries. And the reason, I think, is clear. Many minorities have no presence in Azerbaijani state media. There is no regular airtime in minority languages. As for expressions of cultural identity, they are limited to 1 or 2 ceremonies, which are often subject to state supervision or pressure. Let us now turn to the issue of national minorities in Azerbaijan. A few representatives who have been considered a threat to state security. Let's mention the well-known Talish journalist and cultural figure. In Azerbaijan, he was accused of state treason and other anti-state activities. On February 14, 2020, the Baku Serious Crimes Court found him guilty of the charges brought against him and sentenced him to 16 years in prison. In this regard, the international human rights organization Amnesty International has stated that the Azerbaijani authorities should release the Talish. The activists noted in the report that Abbasov exercised his right to freedom of speech by defending his vision of an independent Talish state. Amnesty International included information about Abbasov in its annual report on human rights around the world. The statement said that Abbasov was a public figure of Talish origin and died in prison while in custody. However, the Baku authorities claimed that he committed suicide, and to this day, no objective investigation has been conducted into the circumstances of his death, according to the aforementioned Mamedov. A journalist by linguistic background and vice president of the Talish Cultural Center, he was arrested in 2012 because he publicly defended the rights of the Talish and Lezgi peoples. Initially accused of drug possession and later of treason and inciting national hatred, a committee was established to protect Mamedov's rights, with the participation of public figures, human rights activists, lawyers, and journalists. Protests in defense of Mamedov's rights were held in Moscow, Chisinau, Berlin, and The Hague. And in Baku as well, petitions for the release of Mamedov from prison have been sent to the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, as well as to several influential political figures around the world. The trial is currently being held behind closed doors. International human rights organizations insist that the arrest was orchestrated, citing another case involving a Talish youth who, in 2010, simply raised the Talish flag in St. Petersburg, Russia. Upon returning to Azerbaijan, he was arrested on charges of terrorism and drug smuggling, and on charges of inciting national hatred. Mir Ismailov was released as a result of pressure from international organizations, and according to Talish information sources, after his release, he was forced to remain silent about his life under risk. Then there is Talish Ruslan, a social media user who, in September 2023, was abducted by the police because of a post he made. They demanded that he confess to at least one of the 3 charges brought against him: espionage for Iran, illegal possession of weapons, and drug trafficking. He did not accept any of these accusations, and for that, at the police station, he was subjected to torture, and despite the charges being false, he was sentenced to 4 years in prison for allegedly acquiring and possessing particularly large quantities of drugs illegally. Thus, we can state that diversity in Baku is tolerated only to the extent that it does not threaten the homogeneous national identity that the Aliyev regime seeks to impose. We will have the opportunity to address the issue of restrictions on political freedoms in Azerbaijan later in our program, but for now, in this context, let's turn to what the President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, has said about Artsakh and the Armenians of Artsakh. He has repeatedly stated that the Armenians of Artsakh can live within Azerbaijan as full citizens of that country. Azerbaijan, in its legal documents, claims that it respects the rights and freedoms of its citizens, including their cultural distinctiveness, regardless of nationality. However, after Azerbaijan's military operation in September 2023, which followed the 9-month blockade of Artsakh and forced more than 100,000 Armenians of Artsakh to leave their homeland, the territory underwent ethnic cleansing. Azerbaijan quickly took steps in Artsakh to erase the Armenian presence. In the direction of erasure, Artsakh was completely depopulated of Armenians in just a few days. Armenian cultural heritage in Artsakh, churches, kachkars, cemeteries, were either destroyed or subjected to Azerbaijani appropriation against this backdrop. Talking about the possibility of Armenians returning to Artsakh and living as Azerbaijani citizens is nothing more than a propaganda tool aimed at misleading the international community. Otherwise, why would Aliyev wage a campaign against the centuries-old Armenian heritage of Artsakh? Thus, the accusations coming from Azerbaijan. Accusations regarding Armenia's mono-ethnicity are not only hypocritical, but also serve as a cover for their own deceptive and oppressive policies. Despite Armenia's demographic homogeneity, its minorities enjoy cultural rights and inclusivity, whereas in Azerbaijan, diversity is tolerated only to the extent that it does not threaten the state's propagandistic image. Azerbaijan uses the slogan of demographic diversity, but in reality, it has created a system where any expression of cultural identity is viewed as a threat to the regime. When Aliyev claims that the Armenians of Artsakh can return and live in peace, the reality is that Baku is using every possible means to cleanse Artsakh of Armenian presence, physically, culturally, and even at the level of historical memory. This is not a promise of peace, but a threat of new repression. The clear indicator is that our goal is to help you see Azerbaijan from the inside without illusions, so that you can form your own understanding of whether real peace is possible with a country that continues to speak the language of force and continues to spread hatred against Armenians.